The flickering lantern light caught the edge of a dirty boot peeking from behind the barrel of potatoes, and Owen Irwin's heart nearly stopped as he realized someone had been living in his cellar without his knowledge. His hand instinctively went to the rifle he had set against the wall when he descended the wooden steps. The year was 1882, and in the Oklahoma Territory, you did not survive long without being cautious. His ranch sat 5 miles outside of what would one day become Oklahoma City, though for now it was just scattered settlements and ambitious railroad planning. The land was harsh and unforgiving, and Owen had carved out his existence here through sheer determination after the war had taken everything from him. "Come out," he said, keeping his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "I know you are there." The boot withdrew slightly, and he heard a sharp intake of breath. Then, slowly, a figure emerged from behind the barrels. A woman, thin and trembling, with matted blonde hair and clothes that had once been fine but were now torn and filthy. Her eyes were enormous in her gaunt face, the color of storm clouds, and filled with such terror that Owen's grip on the rifle loosened slightly. "Please," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Please do not turn me in. They will kill me." Owen stared at her, taking in her condition. She could not have been more than 23 or 24, young and clearly from means based on the quality of her ruined dress. He was 28 himself, and in those years had seen enough suffering to recognize genuine fear when he saw it. "Who will kill you?" he asked, not lowering the rifle but not pointing it directly at her either. The woman's legs seemed to give out, and she sank to the dirt floor of the cellar, her hands shaking as she pulled her knees to her chest. "My husband," she said, and then she began to weep. Owen had been alone for 3 years, ever since he had settled this land. His days consisted of tending cattle, fixing fences, and trying to make something of the dusty acres he had claimed. He spoke to his horses more than to people, made the trip into town maybe once a month for supplies, and had grown accustomed to the silence. But something about this woman's tears cut through the loneliness and the wariness, reaching a part of him he thought had died in the war. He set the rifle down and moved closer, though not close enough to frighten her further. "Why would your husband want to kill you?" She looked up at him, tears streaming down her dirt-streaked face. "Because I tried to leave him, because I saw what he did, because I know too much." The words tumbled out between sobs, and Owen found himself sitting on an old crate, listening as the woman told him her story. Her name was Grace Jameson, and she had come to the Oklahoma Territory 6 months ago as the wife of Marcus Jameson, a man who presented himself as a businessman and landowner. What she had not known when she married him back in St. Louis was that his business was robbery, extortion, and worse. "He seemed so kind when we met," Grace said, her voice barely above a whisper. "My father had died and I had no one. Marcus offered security, a home, a future. I was 19 and foolish." She had discovered the truth 3 months into their marriage when she had found a saddlebag full of money and jewelry in their home, along with a newspaper article about a stagecoach robbery where the driver had been killed. When she confronted Marcus, he had beaten her for the first time. "It would not be the last. I planned my escape for weeks," Grace continued. "He kept me isolated, but there was a woman in town, a seamstress, who helped me. She gave me information about the area, about places I might hide. Your ranch was abandoned when she told me about it. I did not know anyone had moved in until it was too late to leave." Owen felt his chest tighten. "How long have you been in my cellar?" "For days," she admitted. "I came at night. You keep some preserves down here and I only took a little. I am so sorry. I had nowhere else to go." "For days." She had been here for 4 days, hiding in the darkness while he went about his routine above. The thought made him feel strange, as though his solitary world had been touched by something he could not name. "Why did you not just keep moving?" he asked. "Why stay here?" Grace's expression crumbled. "Because I am exhausted. Because I have nowhere to go. My family is all dead. I have no money, no friends in this territory, and Marcus has men looking for me. They came to your door 2 days ago asking if you had seen me." Owen remembered. 3 rough-looking men on horseback had ridden up asking about a woman matching Grace's description. He had told them he had seen no one, which had been the truth at the time, and they had ridden off. He had thought nothing of it beyond being glad they had left his property. "I heard them from down here," Grace said. "I was so frightened I could barely breathe. If they find me, Marcus will kill me. He told me as much the night I ran. He said he would hunt me down and make sure I suffered before I died." The conviction in her voice, the hollow fear in her eyes, told Owen she was not exaggerating. He had known men like that during the war, men who enjoyed cruelty for its own sake. The thought of this frightened woman being dragged back to such a fate made his jaw clench. "You cannot stay in the cellar," he said finally. Grace's face went white and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "Please, I will not be any trouble. You will never know I am here. I just need a little more time to figure out where to go, what to do." Owen shook his head. "I mean you cannot stay in the cellar because it is cold and damp, and you look half-starved. If you are going to hide on my property, you might as well do it properly." The hope that flickered in her eyes was almost painful to witness. "You mean it? You will help me?" "I do not know what I mean," Owen said honestly. "But I cannot in good conscience let you waste away down here or send you out to face men who want to kill you. Come upstairs. You need food and a proper place to sleep." Grace stared at him as though he had offered her the moon. "Why would you do this for me? You do not know me." Owen stood, dusting off his pants. "Maybe that is exactly why. I have no reason to trust your husband or his men and every reason to help someone in need. The war taught me that much." He extended his hand to help her up, and after a moment's hesitation, Grace took it. Her hand was freezing, her grip weak, and as she stood, he could see how badly she was shaking. She could barely walk, stumbling on the stairs, and Owen found himself supporting her weight as they climbed up into the main house. The house was simple, just a main room with a kitchen area, a bedroom, and a loft. It was clean but sparse, the home of a man who cared little for decoration and much for function. Owen guided Grace to a chair near the fireplace and quickly built up the fire, trying to get some warmth into the room. "When did you last eat?" he asked. "I do not remember," Grace said faintly. "Really eat, I mean. I have been taking small bites of your preserves, trying to make them last." Owen moved to the kitchen and began pulling out supplies. He had made stew the day before, and there was still plenty left. He heated it up, cut thick slices of bread, and brought it all to Grace with a cup of water. She ate like someone starving, which of course she was, though she tried to maintain some dignity about it. While she ate, Owen studied her more carefully. Beneath the dirt and exhaustion, she was lovely, with delicate features and hair that would probably shine gold when clean. But it was her eyes that caught him, the way they held both vulnerability and a fierce will to survive. She had been through hell, and yet here she was, still fighting. "You need to clean up and rest," Owen said when she had finished eating. "You can have the bedroom, I will sleep in the loft." Grace looked stricken. "I cannot take your bed." "You can and you will," Owen said firmly. "I have slept in worse places than a loft. There is a basin and water in the bedroom, and I will heat some more so you can wash properly. I think I have an old shirt that might fit you better than that dress." The dress was indeed in terrible condition, torn at the hem and sleeves, stained with dirt and what might have been blood. Grace looked down at herself and seemed to truly see her state for the first time. A flush of embarrassment colored her pale cheeks. "I must look like a vagrant," she whispered. "You look like someone who has been through something terrible," Owen corrected. "There is no shame in that." He heated water on the stove and carried the pot to the bedroom, then found an old cotton shirt and some suspenders that she could use to keep a pair of his smaller work pants up. It was not much, but it was clean and whole. When he brought the clothes to her, Grace clutched them as though they were made of silk. "I do not know how to thank you," she said, her voice breaking. "Just rest," Owen replied. "We can figure out the rest tomorrow." He left her alone in the bedroom and climbed up to the loft, lying on the narrow bed there and staring at the ceiling. His mind was racing. He had just taken in a fugitive, a woman running from a dangerous man. It was foolish, possibly suicidal. Marcus Jameson would not take kindly to someone harboring his wife. Those men could come back, and if they found Grace here, Owen would be in as much danger as she was. But what else could he have done? Leave her to starve in the cellar? Turn her out to be caught and killed? He was not that kind of man, had never been, even when the war had tried to make him into something hard and unfeeling. Sleep came fitfully that night, and he woke several times to the sound of Grace moving around downstairs. Once he heard her crying softly, and it took all his willpower not to go down and try to comfort her. She was a stranger, he reminded himself. He needed to maintain some distance, some sense of propriety. When dawn broke, Owen rose and dressed quietly, descending the ladder to find Grace already awake and sitting by the fire. She had washed and changed into his clothes, and the transformation was startling. Clean, with her hair brushed and hanging loose down her back, she looked younger and more fragile, but also somehow stronger. The terror from the night before had been replaced by a determined set to her jaw. "Good morning," she said softly. "Morning," Owen replied, moving to the kitchen to start coffee. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in months," Grace admitted. "A real bed, warmth, feeling safe. I cannot tell you what that means." Owen poured 2 cups of coffee and brought one to her. "We need to talk about what happens next," Grace nodded, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. "I know I cannot stay here indefinitely. It would put you in danger." "Where will you go?" Owen asked. "You said yourself you have no money, no family." "I have been thinking about that all night," Grace said. "There are wagon trains that pass through, heading further west. If I could get to one of them, I could work my way to California or Oregon, start over somewhere Marcus cannot find me." It was a sensible plan, but it had significant problems. Wagon trains require supplies, and they do not usually take on single women without families. Too much risk, too many complications. Grace's face fell. "Then what do you suggest?" Owen had been thinking about this too, though his thoughts had taken him in a direction that surprised him. "You could stay here, at least for a while. Help around the ranch in exchange for room and board. I could use an extra pair of hands, and it would give you time to figure things out properly, maybe save some money." "Stay here," Grace repeated, her eyes widening. "But what about your reputation?" "What will people think?" "There are not many people to think anything," Owen pointed out. "I keep to myself. The nearest neighbor is 3 miles away, and I only go into town once a month. As far as anyone needs to know, you are my cousin or my sister, come to help me run the place." It was a risk, and they both knew it. But as they sat there in the quiet morning, the fire crackling and the coffee warming their hands, it also felt like the only real option. Grace needed time and safety, and Owen found that he wanted to provide both. "Why are you doing this?" Grace asked again. "You do not know me. You do not owe me anything." Owen was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. "During the war, I was injured badly. I would have died if a stranger had not taken me in, hidden me from the soldiers looking for survivors to finish off." That woman risked her life for me, someone she did not know. She told me that kindness was the only thing that could survive such terrible times. I suppose I am just passing that along." Grace's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they seemed different, softer. "Then I accept your offer with gratitude. I will work hard, I promise. I will earn my keep." "I do not doubt it," Owen said, and he found himself smiling slightly, the expression feeling strange on his face after so long. The days that followed fell into a rhythm that surprised them both. Grace was not accustomed to ranch work, her hands soft and unused to labor, but she learned quickly and never complained. Owen taught her how to feed the chickens he kept, how to tend the vegetable garden, how to mend fences and care for the horses. She was a quick study, absorbing information and applying it with determination. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, and slowly, carefully, they began to share their stories. Owen told her about growing up in Missouri, about joining the army too young and seeing things no one should see. He spoke of losing his parents to illness, of drifting west after the war because there was nothing left for him back home. Grace told him about her childhood in St. Louis, the daughter of a successful merchant who had lost everything in a bad business deal before dying of a broken heart. She spoke of the desperation that had led her to accept Marcus's proposal, of the hope that had been so quickly crushed. "I was such a fool," she said one evening, staring into the flames. "I thought love would come after marriage, that I would grow to care for him. Instead, I learned to fear him." "You were not a fool," Owen said quietly. "You were young and alone and trying to survive. We all make choices based on what we know at the time." As the weeks passed, something began to shift between them. It started with small things: the way Grace smiled when Owen came in from working with the cattle, the way his heart lifted when he heard her singing while she worked in the garden. They found themselves lingering over meals, talking late into the night, sharing thoughts and fears they had never voiced to anyone else. Owen had not realized how lonely he had been until Grace arrived. Her presence filled the empty spaces in the house and in his life, bringing warmth and light to places that had been dark for too long. He found himself noticing everything about her: the way she pushed her hair back when she was concentrating, the sound of her laugh when something amused her, the careful way she darned his socks in the evening. Grace, for her part, was discovering what it felt like to be treated with respect and kindness. Owen never raised his voice to her, never made her feel small or afraid. He asked her opinions, listened when she spoke, and valued her contributions to the ranch. She found herself watching him when he worked, admiring the strength in his shoulders, the gentleness in his hands when he handled the animals, the quiet integrity that seemed to radiate from him. But they were both careful, both aware of the fragile nature of their situation. Grace was still legally married, still in danger. They could not afford to let their feelings complicate things further, no matter how strong those feelings were becoming. 2 months after Grace had arrived, the situation changed. Owen had gone into town for supplies, something he had been doing alone because it was too dangerous for Grace to be seen. He was loading flour and salt into the wagon when he overheard 2 men talking outside the general store. "Marcus Jameson is getting desperate," one of them said. "Offering a reward now for information about his wife. Says she ran off and he is worried sick about her." The other man snorted. "Everyone knows Jameson is no good. That woman is probably running for her life." "Maybe so, but money is money. $500 is a lot to pass up." Owen's blood ran cold. $500 was a fortune, enough to tempt even honest people. He finished loading the wagon quickly and headed back to the ranch, his mind racing. They needed to be more careful. They needed to plan for what would happen if someone discovered Grace. When he arrived home, he found Grace hanging laundry, her face turned up to the sun. She looked peaceful, healthier than when she had arrived, and the sight of her made his chest ache. He did not want to take that peace away, but she needed to know. "Grace," he called, and something in his tone made her turn, her expression immediately concerned. "What is wrong?" He told her about the conversation, about the reward. Grace went pale, her hands gripping the laundry basket so hard her knuckles turned white. $500, she whispered. "Owen, that is too much. Someone will turn me in for that." "Not if they do not know you are here," Owen said firmly. "We have been careful. No one has seen you. We just need to keep it that way." But Grace was shaking her head, tears starting to stream down her face. "I cannot let you risk everything for me. If Marcus finds out you have been hiding me, he will kill you. You know he will." Owen moved to her, taking the basket from her hands and setting it down. Without thinking, he grasped her shoulders gently. "Grace, look at me." She raised her eyes to his, and he saw the fear there, but also something else, something that made his heart pound. "I am not afraid of Marcus Jameson," Owen said, "and I am not going to let him hurt you. You are safe here." "I will make sure of it." "Why?" Grace asked, her voice breaking. "Why do you care so much? Why are you willing to risk so much for me?" The question hung between them, heavy with unspoken truth. Owen could have deflected, could have given her a practical answer about doing the right thing. But standing there with his hands on her shoulders, her eyes searching his face, he found he could not lie. "Because I care about you," he said quietly. "Because these last 2 months have been the best of my life. Because when I think about you leaving, it feels like losing something precious. Because He stopped, struggling with words he had never said to anyone. "Because I love you, Grace." The silence that followed was deafening. Grace stared at him, her eyes wide, tears still streaming down her cheeks. Then, slowly, she reached up and placed her hand against his cheek. "I love you too," she whispered. "I have been so afraid to admit it, even to myself. I am still married. I have no right to feel this way, but I cannot help it. You have shown me what it means to be truly cared for, truly valued. You have given me back my life." Owen pulled her into his arms, holding her close as she wept against his chest. He felt her trembling, felt the weight of everything she had been carrying, and he wanted nothing more than to take it all away. To give her the life she deserved, free from fear and pain. "We will figure this out," he promised. "Somehow, we will find a way." But finding a way proved more complicated than either of them hoped. In the Oklahoma Territory in 1882, divorce was difficult and scandalous, requiring proof of adultery or cruelty and often taking years to finalize. Even if they could get a divorce, Marcus would never agree to it, and the legal proceedings would expose Grace's location. They spent days talking through options, trying to find a solution. Grace suggested she could disappear entirely, change her name and move far away, but the idea of her leaving made Owen's chest constrict painfully. He had lived alone for so long, and now that he had found her, the thought of going back to that solitary existence was unbearable. "There has to be another way," he insisted one evening as they sat by the fire. "Something we are not seeing." Grace was curled in the chair, wearing one of his shirts over her work dress, her hair braided down her back. She looked thoughtful, chewing her bottom lip in a way that Owen had come to find endearing. "What if we went to the law?" she suggested. "What if I testified about what Marcus does, about his crimes? If he were arrested and sent to prison, I would be free of him." Owen had considered this, but the risks were enormous. You would have to testify publicly, expose yourself. And Marcus has connections, money. He might find a way to turn things around, make you look like the criminal. Or worse, he might have you killed before you could testify. "Then we are trapped," Grace said softly. As long as Marcus is free, I cannot be. The helplessness in her voice cut Owen deeply. He stood and began pacing, his mind working through possibilities. There had to be something, some way to keep Grace safe and build a life together. "What if you were already dead?" he said suddenly. Grace looked up, startled. "What? In Marcus's eyes, I mean. What if he believed you had died? Then he would stop looking for you and you would be free to live under a different name." The idea was wild, possibly impossible, but as they talked it through, it began to take shape. They would need help, someone trustworthy who could spread the word that Grace's body had been found. It would need to be convincing enough that Marcus would believe it, but vague enough that he would not demand to see the body. "I might know someone," Owen said slowly. "Tom Sullivan, the sheriff in town. We fought together during the war. He is a good man, honest. If I explained the situation, he might be willing to help." It was an enormous risk. If Tom did not believe them, or if he felt duty-bound to uphold the law regardless of circumstances, they could both end up in serious trouble. But as Owen looked at Grace, at the hope dawning in her eyes, he knew he would take that risk. The next day, Owen rode into town alone and asked to speak with Tom privately. The sheriff was a tall, weathered man in his mid-30s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. He listened without interruption as Owen explained everything: how he had found Grace, who she was running from, and what they hoped to do. When Owen finished, Tom was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming on his desk. Finally, he spoke. "Marcus Jameson is a snake," he said bluntly. "I have suspected for a while that he is involved in criminal activities, but I have never been able to prove it. If his wife disappeared and stopped running, it might make him bold, careless. He might make mistakes that would let me finally bring him to justice." Owen felt a spark of hope. "So you will help us?" "I will help you," Tom agreed. "But you need to understand the risks. If Jameson ever discovers the truth, he will come for both of you. And if I am found to have falsified a report, my career is over." "I understand," Owen said, "and I am grateful, more than I can say." Tom nodded slowly. "There is a woman, a drifter, who died last week. No family, no one to claim her body. She was about the same age and build as your Grace. I can report that a body was found matching Grace Jameson's description, believed to have died from exposure. Jameson will be notified, and hopefully, that will be the end of it." The plan was set in motion. Tom filed his report, and word spread through the territory that Marcus Jameson's missing wife had been found dead. Owen waited anxiously at the ranch, watching for any sign that the plan had failed, that Marcus or his men were coming. 3 days later, Tom visited the ranch to report that Marcus had identified the body as his wife and was arranging for burial. He had seemed satisfied, even relieved, which Tom found telling. He was not grieving, Tom said. He was glad to be rid of the problem. "That tells me everything I need to know about the man." Grace wept when she heard the news, but they were tears of relief. She was free. As far as the world knew, Grace Jameson was dead. She would need a new identity, a new name, but she could stay with Owen without fear. "I have been thinking," Owen said that evening as they sat together, "about what name you should take." Grace looked at him curiously. "What do you mean?" "Well, if you are going to stay here permanently, people will need something to call you. And if we are going to be together the way I want us to be, you will need a different last name anyway." Grace's breath caught. "Owen, what are you asking?" He took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "I am asking if you would do me the honor of becoming my wife. I know it is complicated. I know there are risks. But I love you, Grace. I want to build a life with you, a real life, out in the open. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want children with you, a future with you, if you will have me." Grace was crying again, but she was also smiling, her face radiant in the firelight. "Yes," she said. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They could not have a traditional wedding, of course. Grace was legally dead, and any official ceremony would raise questions. But Tom Sullivan agreed to perform a private ceremony at the ranch, serving as both officiant and witness. On a crisp October morning, with autumn colors blazing across the Oklahoma landscape, Grace and Owen stood together and spoke their vows. Grace wore a simple blue dress that Owen had bought for her, and she had woven wildflowers into her hair. Owen wore his best shirt and pants, cleaned and pressed. They had no rings, no guests, no celebration, but none of that mattered. What mattered was the promises they made to each other, the commitment they spoke aloud. "I, Owen Irwin, take you, Grace, to be my wife," Owen said, his voice steady and sure. "I promise to protect you, to cherish you, to stand by you no matter what comes. You have brought light into my life, and I will spend every day trying to be worthy of the gift you have given me." Grace's vows were interrupted by tears, but she pushed through them. "I, Grace, take you, Owen Irwin, to be my husband. You saved my life in every way possible. You showed me what love truly is. I promise to honor you, to support you, to build a life with you that is filled with joy and hope. You are my home, Owen. You always will be." Tom pronounced them married, and Owen kissed his bride gently, tasting salt from her tears and feeling his own eyes sting. When they pulled apart, Grace was laughing, the sound like music. "I am Grace Irwin now," she said wonderingly. "I have a new name, a new life, a new everything." "And I have you," Owen said. "That is all I need." Tom left them alone, and they spent the rest of the day together, walking the property that was now theirs to share. Grace had come to love the ranch over the months she had been there, and now she could claim it openly as her home. They talked about improvements they wanted to make, about expanding the herd, about building onto the house. "I want a garden," Grace said. "A proper one with flowers and vegetables, and maybe some fruit trees." "Done," Owen agreed. "Anything you want." That night, in the privacy of their bedroom, they came together as husband and wife. Owen was gentle, careful, knowing that Grace's experience of intimacy had been tainted by fear and pain. He took his time, learning what made her sigh with pleasure, what made her gasp and clutch at him. He worshipped her body with his hands and mouth, trying to show her without words how precious she was to him. Grace discovered what it meant to be touched with love rather than possession. She learned that her body could be a source of joy rather than fear, that she could trust Owen completely. When they finally joined, moving together in the oldest dance, it felt like coming home. Afterward, they lay tangled together, skin to skin, hearts beating in sync. "I love you," Grace whispered into the darkness. "I never knew it could be like this." Owen kissed her forehead, holding her close. "Neither did I, but I am glad we found it together." The months that followed were the happiest either of them had ever known. They worked the ranch side by side, their partnership extending beyond the house into every aspect of their lives. Grace proved to have a good head for business, helping Owen negotiate better prices for their cattle and plan for expansion. Owen taught her to ride properly, and she took to it with enthusiasm, galloping across the prairie with her hair flying behind her. They made cautious trips into town together, with Grace introduced as Owen's wife from back east. Some people might have wondered about the sudden appearance of a spouse, but most were too busy with their own concerns to pry. Grace kept her hair covered and stayed close to Owen, and gradually, they both began to relax into their new life. The fear that Marcus might discover the truth never completely disappeared, but it faded into the background as months passed without incident. Tom Sullivan reported that Marcus had left the Oklahoma Territory, moving his operations to Kansas. Without his wife to hunt, He seemed to have lost interest in the area. Spring came, and with it, news that made Grace gasp with joy and terror in equal measure. She was pregnant. Owen was overjoyed, sweeping her into his arms and spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to stop. "We are going to have a baby," he kept saying, as though he could not quite believe it. "A child, our child." Grace was happy too, but she was also frightened. Childbirth was dangerous, and they were far from doctors or midwives. Owen saw her fear and held her close. "I will not let anything happen to you," he promised. "I will find someone to help when the time comes. You and our baby will be safe." He kept his promise. As Grace's pregnancy progressed, Owen made arrangements with a midwife from the closest town, a capable woman named Martha who agreed to come stay with them as Grace's time approached. He prepared the house meticulously, making sure they had everything they might need. Grace bloomed with pregnancy, her body rounding in ways that Owen found beautiful. He loved to place his hand on her belly and feel their child kick, loved to see the maternal glow in her eyes. They spent evenings talking to the baby, telling stories and making plans, building dreams for a future that once seemed impossible. In December of 1883, on a cold night with snow falling softly outside, Grace went into labor. Martha was there, calm and efficient, guiding Grace through the long hours of pain and effort. Owen stayed by his wife's side, holding her hand, wiping sweat from her forehead, whispering encouragement. "You can do this," he told her during a particularly difficult contraction. "You are the strongest person I know. Just a little longer." Grace gripped his hand so hard he thought his bones might break, but he did not care. All that mattered was her, their child, this moment they had fought so hard to reach. Finally, after hours of labor, a baby's cry split the air. Martha wrapped the infant and placed it in Grace's arms, and Owen felt tears stream down his face as he looked at his son. His son, a perfect, tiny human with wispy dark hair and eyes that would eventually turn the same color as Grace's. "He is beautiful," Grace whispered, exhausted but radiant. "He is perfect." They named him Samuel, after Owen's father, and called him Sam. The baby transformed their lives completely, filling the house with noise and joy and wonder. Owen had never imagined himself as a father, but he discovered he loved every aspect of it, even the sleepless nights and endless diaper changes. Watching Grace with their son, seeing her gentle patience and deep love, only made Owen fall more deeply in love with her. As Sam grew from infant to toddler, the ranch prospered. Owen and Grace worked hard, and their efforts paid off in increased herds and successful harvests. They were able to hire help, a young man named Peter who proved reliable and discreet. With extra hands, Grace had more time to devote to Sam and to the projects she had been dreaming about. She created the garden she had wanted, with flowers that bloomed in brilliant colors and vegetables that fed them through the winter. She planted fruit trees that would one day provide apples and peaches. She made the house into a real home, with curtains and quilts and touches of beauty everywhere. Owen had never been happier. He would come in from working and find Grace singing to Sam, or teaching him his letters, or baking bread while the toddler played at her feet. These simple domestic scenes filled him with a contentment he had never thought possible. When Sam was 3, Grace discovered she was pregnant again. This time, there was less fear and more excitement. They knew what to expect, and they were eager to expand their family. Owen hoped for a daughter this time, someone who might have Grace's eyes and stubborn determination. Martha came again when Grace's time arrived, and after a shorter but intense labor, Grace delivered a healthy baby girl. They named her Elizabeth, called her Beth, and Sam was fascinated by his tiny sister, wanting to be involved in everything concerning her. Life settled into a rhythm of work and family, of seasons passing and children growing. But 5 years after Grace had first hidden in Owen's cellar, the past came calling in a way they had not expected. Owen was in town buying supplies when he overheard a disturbing conversation. Marcus Jameson was back in the Oklahoma Territory, and he was asking questions. Apparently, he had remarried, and his new wife bore a striking resemblance to his first wife. Someone had made a comment about it, and Marcus had become obsessed with the idea that Grace might still be alive. Owen's blood ran cold. He found Tom Sullivan immediately and told him what he had heard. "Marcus has been drinking heavily," Tom said grimly, "making wild accusations. Most people think he is just losing his mind, but if he starts digging, if he comes out to your ranch—" "I will not let him near my family," Owen said, his voice hard. Tom nodded. "I have been building a case against him for years. I finally have enough evidence to arrest him for robbery and murder. I was planning to make my move next week, but maybe I should do it now." "Do it now," Owen agreed. "Today, if possible." Tom moved fast. By evening, Marcus Jameson was in custody, arrested for crimes that would see him hang or spend the rest of his life in prison. The evidence was overwhelming. Tom had been patient and thorough. Marcus's men scattered, and the criminal network he had built began to crumble. Owen rode home in the dark, his heart pounding. He needed to tell Grace, needed to let her know that the threat was finally, truly over. When he arrived, he found her putting the children to bed, Sam and Beth already in their night clothes. "Papa," Sam cried, running to hug his father's legs. "You are home." Owen scooped his son up, kissing his forehead, then did the same with Beth. "I missed you both. Were you good for your mother?" "Always," Beth said solemnly, and Grace laughed. "Mostly," she corrected. "Now say good night to your father and get into bed." After the children were settled, Owen and Grace retreated to their own room. Owen told her everything about Marcus being back, about the arrest, about how it was finally over. Grace sat on the edge of the bed, tears streaming down her face. "He cannot hurt me anymore." "Never again," Owen promised, kneeling in front of her and taking her hands. "He will pay for everything he has done. You are safe. We all are." Grace pulled Owen up and kissed him fiercely, pouring years of relief and gratitude into that kiss. "You saved me," she said when they broke apart. "In every way a person can be saved." "We saved each other," Owen corrected. "You gave me a reason to live again, Grace. You gave me a family, a purpose, joy. I was just existing before you came into my life. Now I am truly alive." They held each other for a long time, feeling the weight of years of fear finally lift. When they made love that night, it was with a freedom and passion they had never quite allowed themselves before. Every touch was a celebration, every kiss a promise of the future they could finally fully embrace. In the days that followed, the territory buzzed with news of Marcus Jameson's arrest and trial. The crimes he had committed were worse than anyone had realized, and the evidence was damning. Grace was never mentioned, her supposed death years earlier keeping her name out of the proceedings entirely. Marcus was convicted and sentenced to hang, and when the sentence was carried out, Grace wept not for him, but for the girl she had been who had trusted the wrong person, and for the woman she had become who was finally free. The years passed in a blur of happiness and hard work. Owen and Grace expanded the ranch until it was one of the most successful in the territory. Sam grew into a serious, studious boy who loved books and animals in equal measure. Beth was wild and fearless, climbing trees and riding horses before she was 5, making her parents laugh with her antics. When Oklahoma officially became a state in 1889, Owen and Grace celebrated with their children and friends, feeling a deep connection to the land they had built their life on. They had seen the territory grow from rough settlements into organized towns, had witnessed the arrival of railroads and telegraphs, had been part of the transformation of the frontier. Through it all, their love remained constant and growing. They still sat by the fire in the evenings, talking and dreaming. They still woke up tangled together, still found excuses to steal kisses during the day. The passion between them never faded, tempered now by deep affection and partnership, but still burning bright. On their 10th anniversary, Owen took Grace back to the cellar where he had first found her. It was clean now, well organized, nothing like the desperate hiding place it had been. Grace stood at the bottom of the stairs, looking around, and then turned to Owen with tears in her eyes. "I was so frightened," she said softly. "I thought I was going to die down here. I thought Marcus would find me and kill me, or that I would starve, or that I would simply give up. And then you came down those stairs and everything changed." Owen pulled her into his arms. "I remember seeing your boot, thinking someone had invaded my space. I was angry at first. But then I saw your face, heard your story, and I knew I could not walk away. I think some part of me loved you even then, before I knew your name, before I knew who you were. Some part of me recognized you as the missing piece of my life. I fell in love with your kindness first," Grace said. "Then your strength. Then everything else. I had given up on love, thought it was something that did not exist for people like me. You proved me wrong in the most beautiful way." They kissed in the cellar, in the place where their story had begun, and then climbed back up into the light together. As the children grew older, Owen and Grace told them edited versions of how they met, leaving out the more dangerous details until they were old enough to understand. Sam and Beth grew up knowing that their parents had a deep, enduring love, and it shaped how they saw the world and relationships. Sam eventually went to college, coming back to the ranch during breaks, and eventually bringing home a young woman named Julia whom he had met at school. Owen and Grace welcomed her warmly, and when Sam announced his intention to marry, they gave their blessing gladly. Beth, true to her nature, married a ranch hand who worked on a neighboring property, a kind young man who could match her spirit and independence. She and her husband built a small ranch of their own nearby, staying close to family while forging their own path. As grandchildren arrived, Owen and Grace found new joy in watching the next generation grow. They were the kind of grandparents who spoiled shamelessly, who told stories and taught skills and provided unconditional love. The ranch became a gathering place for the extended family, full of noise and life and laughter. In their 60s, Owen and Grace finally slowed down, hiring managers to run most of the ranch operations while they focused on smaller projects and family. They spent their days working in the garden together, taking long rides across the property, and sitting on the porch in the evenings watching sunsets. "Do you ever regret it?" Grace asked one evening as they sat together, her head on his shoulder. "Taking me in that day? Your life would have been so much simpler without me." Owen turned to look at her, seeing the lines time had drawn on her face, the silver in her hair, the wisdom in her eyes. She was more beautiful to him now than she had been at 23, every year of their life together having added depth and richness to who she was. "Regret you," he said. "Grace, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. Every challenge, every risk, every moment of fear was worth it 1,000 times over. You gave me everything that matters: love, family, purpose, joy. My only regret is that I did not have more years with you. That time went by so fast." Grace smiled, tears gleaming in her eyes. "We still have time. We still have each other. Always," Owen promised, "until my last breath and beyond." They grew old together on the ranch, surrounded by the family they had created and the life they had built. When Owen was 74, his heart finally gave out peacefully in his sleep, with Grace beside him as she had been for over 40 years. She held his hand as he took his last breath, and though her heart broke, she was grateful for every moment they had shared. Grace lived 3 more years without him, cared for lovingly by their children and grandchildren. She spent her days in the garden Owen had helped her create, tending the flowers and trees they had planted together. She told stories about their life to anyone who would listen, keeping his memory alive and vibrant. On a spring morning much like the one when they had married, Grace passed away in her sleep. She was buried next to Owen on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a simple marker that read, "Grace Irwin, beloved wife, mother, grandmother. She found love in the darkness and built a life in the light." At her funeral, their children and grandchildren gathered to remember her, sharing stories of her courage, her kindness, her fierce love for family. Sam told the full story then, of how his mother had been hiding in the cellar, of how his father had saved her, of the love that had grown from that desperate beginning. "They taught us that love is not just a feeling but a choice," Sam said, his voice thick with emotion. Every day they chose each other. Through fear and danger, through hard work and hardship, through joy and sorrow, they chose love. That is the legacy they left us, and it is a precious gift. The ranch stayed in the family for generations, each new generation hearing the story of Owen and Grace, of the lonely rancher who found a woman hiding in his cellar, and the love story that changed both their lives. It became a legend in the family, a reminder that sometimes the greatest love stories begin in the darkest places, and that courage and kindness can transform everything. The cellar still exists, preserved as part of the family history. Grandchildren and great-grandchildren would go down there, standing where Grace once hid, trying to imagine what it must have been like. The fear, the desperation, the hope. And then they would climb back up into the house, into the home that love had built, and understand in their bones that from darkness can come light, from fear can come courage, and from loneliness can come the deepest, most enduring love. Owen and Grace's story lived on, passed down through the years, a testament to the power of compassion and the transforming nature of love. They had started as strangers, one frightened and fleeing, one lonely and adrift. They had become partners, lovers, spouses, parents. They had built not just a ranch but a legacy, not just a family but a foundation of love that would support generations to come. In the end, that is what mattered most. Not the fear they had overcome or the obstacles they had faced, but the love they had chosen, nurtured, and allowed to flourish. It was a love that had started in a dark cellar and had grown to fill a house, a family, a lifetime. It was a love that proved that even in the wild, harsh landscape of the frontier, tenderness could take root and thrive. It was a love that showed that sometimes the people we save end up saving us right back. And on quiet evenings, when the wind blew across the Oklahoma prairie, and the sun set in brilliant colors over the ranch that Owen and Grace had built together, it almost seemed as though you could hear them still laughing together in the garden, talking by the fire, whispering words of love that had transcended time and death to become eternal. Their story was complete, their circle closed, their love proven and enduring. It was exactly the kind of ending they both would have wanted, together in death as they had been in life, their legacy living on in the family they had created, and the love they had shown was possible, even in the most unlikely circumstances. From a desperate woman hiding in a cellar to a love story that spanned generations, Grace and Owen had created something beautiful, something lasting, something that proved that love, real love, conquers all.